Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome in to another new episode of The Lager Line, as always served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing. I'm your host, Ben Dubose, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire and contributor to Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets. Today I'm joined by Paulo Alves, our co-host and producer. Paulo, I know it's been a rough day for you in Portugal. Portugal knocked out of the World Cup. I can relate because Team USA was, of course, knocked out of the World Cup 1 week ago on Saturday the 3rd. How's it going over there, my friend?
It could be better. I don't want to talk about it.
Fair enough. And I will point out we can sort of commiserate because it's been a bad sports day across the board. U of H men's basketball, number one in the country. They lost at home today against Alabama. University of Missouri grad, they got absolutely destroyed by KU, Kansas, their main rival. We mentioned Portugal and Team USA in the World Cup. At least we have the Astros winning the World Series a month ago. And at least we can also say that the Rockets, while they did not win their most recent game on Thursday against San Antonio, there are some obvious lower expectations due to the rebuild. And the silver lining for the Rockets, they're 4-5 at home this year. They're 3-13 on the road, which is worse than the NBA, but the 4-5 is nearly 500, and they're kicking off a homestand of 7 games, which is their longest of the entire season, beginning Sunday night against Milwaukee. I've got a few theories as to the discrepancy, and the biggest one to me, we should acknowledge off the top that it is a small sample, and this could change. We'll see what happens over the next 7 games. But to me, the biggest reason for the discrepancy that I can come up with, when it comes to on-court leadership and structure, the position that I think most people associate with winning in the NBA is point guard. That's what sort of organizes your team. We know the Rockets don't really have a true point guard, be it Kevin Porter Jr. or those behind him. TyTy Washington, as a rookie, has barely played. Daishen Nix, second-year player, has struggled. And when you don't have that level of organization and things don't go your way on the road, it's very easy for things to sort of spiral on you. Whereas when you're at home, sure, you're going to have the turnovers. The Rockets do lead the league in turnovers per game, but it's much easier to sort of stay the course and to stay with the game plan. So I know it's a small sample. When you look at 4-5 at home and 3-13 on the road, and just that wide discrepancy, there's always some discrepancy for really teams across the league. But even amongst young teams, it's rather extreme in Houston. My theory is that a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Rockets just don't have a floor general. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And to me, it comes down to, as much as I don't like saying it, to me, it comes down to Jalen Green. His stats, especially efficiency-wise, on the road versus at home, it's going from, this elite scorer to this, empty stats, call it whatever you want, like guy that's scoring 20 points a game that's not efficient at all.
Yeah, by the way, I just called it up. His true shooting percentage at home is 64%. His true shooting percentage on the road is 48%. By the more traditional metrics, he's shooting above 50% from overall and 40% from three at home. On the road, he's 37% overall and below 30% from three. So it's a staggering difference. And while it would be a stretch to say that Jalen Green is consistently the Rockets' best player, what I do think is fair to say about Jalen is that he has a gear that nobody else on this team can get to. So when he's right, and he often has been at home, then clearly he's the type of guy that can lead a team and can get you some wins. Whereas when he's inefficient, the way he's been on the road and just sort of being a volume scorer, then yeah, it's going to be ugly because they don't have much else.
Yeah, and to Jalen's credit, right, I will have to say that the last few games, last 10 games or so, his free throw attempts have gone way up, and it's and there's a correlation. If you go back and watch the game and look at the stats from the games, he's getting to the line a lot more when his 3-point shot is not falling. which is It's like, okay, my shot's not falling. I'm going to drive every single time. And he's been I don't know if like longer standing listeners of the podcast may remember me saying he needs to go to the James Harden Academy of Flopping. Not to James Harden's extent, but we've seen him flop and sell contact. I'll call it sell contact a little bit more, and that's good. It wasn't a dig at Harden. That's a good thing. In the past, like if we go back, there's some numbers that jump at you, right? There's 2 games ago against the Sixers, he was 0 for 7 from 3, but he got to the line 10 times. Before that, he was 1 for 8 from 3, and he got to the line 8 times. He was 0 for 4 from 3 against Indiana, and he got to the line 15 times. He was 2 for 7 from 3 against Phoenix, and he got to the line 16 times. And then there's games where he's shooting better from 3, but he rarely gets to the line. And so for him, it's about putting those two together. And when he does, we'll finally have that dynamic scorer that everybody thinks he can be, and that I believe he can be as well. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a part of it. And then not Jalen in specific, but the team. I think the home versus on the road thing is also a little bit about matchups. And why do I say this? If we go back and look at the teams that Houston has beat, we generally do well against teams that run a lot of ISO and have heliocentric superstars. If we go back, Houston against Philadelphia, the last win they got James Harden very much an ISO guy. We know that better than anybody else. Joel Embiid very much an ISO guy as well. It's not a guy that's gonna be running around screens or anything. So we did well, even though we couldn't contain Joel Embiid. We generally slow-paced teams and ISO-heavy teams we do well against. If we go back to the win before that, Phoenix, without Chris Paul, Devin Booker is very much an ISO guy. They're going to ride Devin Booker for as much as he can get him. We won that game because of that as well. If we go back again, the other teams we've beat is the Thunder, Atlanta, and Dallas, and Orlando.
Yeah.
Orlando and the Thunder are very much not great teams, and so and even OKC, who they have a better record, they very much have one guy that carries it, which is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And so there's a theme going here. If you're not noticing, Dallas with Luka Doncic, same thing, and then Orlando, it's also one of the other really bad teams in the league, so you have a chance at beating them, I would assume. And then the other win we have, it's against the Jazz, which is, once again, a team that is not great. And when we played them, I think they were coming off of a back-to-back. So you can find patterns to explain a lot of our wins. And these matchups happen. Being at home helps, of course, but we getting these favorable matchups, especially on the defensive side of the floor, because offensively it doesn't really make much difference. But playing teams that run ISO offense for us it's better, because we get lost on screens a lot. So a lot of young players, they back cuts kill them, not knowing when to switch and when to not switch kills them. When we're facing these ISO heavy teams, which we have been mostly at home so far, we seem to do well. I think considering the sample size is this small, I think that's the biggest reason why we're getting these wins at home and not on the road. But this still does not explain what's going on with Jalen Green. And that's probably a good question to ask Silas. Why does he think that Jalen Green is so much better at home than on the road?
Mm-hmm. And to this point, of course, the sample is so tilted towards the road. I believe they played 16 on the road and 9 at home, or I think 15 on the road and 9 at home. Or no, I was right originally, 16-9, because they played 25 games as we're recording this Saturday night, 7 and 18. So, yeah, part of it, unfortunately, could be the home sample is limited. That's about to even out with 7 straight home games. So hopefully that holds at least something close to it in terms of the superior percentages for Jalen at Toyota Center, because, of course, that would help his season-long efficiency in a big way if he can produce like that over the next 7 games. And, again, I should point out that when I led off with my theory about the point guard position, it's not trying to blame it all on Kevin Porter Jr. Some of this is our favorite square peg round hole analogy. Kevin Porter Jr. did not ask to be really the only point guard on this team. He's not a traditional point guard, and he did not make the choice not to have any sort of qualified backup with experience at the position. Those were roster construction decisions in terms of how he's utilized. That's Stephen Silas now. He develops a game plan, the roster construction. That's Rafael Stone, general manager. So this is not piling on to Kevin Porter Jr. This is just acknowledging the strengths and weaknesses of the team as it's out there right now. And what's interesting, when I looked at the data, I expected to find maybe a big discrepancy in assists, turnovers, offensive rating, defensive rating, something along those lines. I really didn't. Now, I still think that some of the turnovers that the Rockets backcourt, KPJ and Jalen Green, some of the ones that they have can be especially backbreaking on the road when you have the crowd against you and things can sort of spiral. But honestly, the biggest statistical outlier when I looked at their home games and the road, and this really surprised me, was actually in rebounding. At home, they are number 2 in the NBA. On the road, they're number 13. While not bad, that's the difference between being elite at it and being basically middle of the pack, mediocre. I don't know why that is. Some of it could be the matchups as you were going into. Some of it could just be simply how hard do you play. It's easier to play it hard when you're young and the crowd has your back as opposed to when things aren't going your way. But it just surprised me a little bit that of all the stats, it's actually rebounding that has the biggest discrepancy, 2 to 13. What do you make of that? Is that statistical randomness, or do you think it's attributable to any sort of, matchup or lack thereof?
I think it can be a little bit of both. I think there's probably some that goes into it just playing at home and, offensive rebounds and hustle plays get the crowd going, even if you're losing, right? And so I think that plays a role into it. I think another thing that plays a role into it is, if we go back to the matchups again, Philadelphia has Joel Embiid, who, Joel Embiid is a great player, but he has so big of an offensive load that he's not going to be, hustling for rebounds. And they're definitely a team that's on the older side and that you can out hustle a bit. In their game against us, Joel Embiid had 7 rebounds. Phoenix, when we play them, I don't know how many people still remember this, but DeAndre Ayton, their rebounding center, was in foul trouble for most of the game. OKC, I don't think plays a real center. They don't play like an actual NBA center.
Correct.
And then Atlanta, when we played them, Clint Capella was out.
Yep.
So we're once again seeing a lot of outliers where, we're out rebounding these teams because there's some outlier, players missing. I think Dallas is probably a team that is not an outlier because they have Christian Wood. He's not a great rebounder, but he does like to stat pad a little bit. So, and they have a lot of forwards, so I would expect them to rebound decently. But I think as I said, it's a combination of both of those things. And I think I would also love to go back to it, and see how many of these games where we're out rebounding our opponents at home, how many of them does Şengün get in foul trouble? He's one of our best rebounders. How many of them does Jabari and TyTy, who at times during the season have also had foul trouble and played less minutes because of it? We are a good rebounding team this year. We weren't last year. And the big differences between those is Şengün's playing more. He's a better rebounder. And then TyTy and Jabari and KJ Martin are good rebounders for their positions. I would say they hustle a lot. And so when you add or decrease the minutes out of these guys, it plays a role as well.
One guy that's contributed in a positive way really to the last 14 games, I would say, the turning point for the Rockets. The first 10 games was really ugly, and Jabari Smith Jr., rookie power forward, drafted number 3 overall, really struggled out of the gate. And of course, he's just 19 years old. He also had an ankle injury. Whereas the last 14 games, he's been a lot better, not just as a shooter, but a rebounder as well. His last 14 games, he's averaging 15 points. Or sorry, that's his last 8 games. I'll get to that. His last 14 games, he's averaging 13.9 points, 7.9 boards, and under 31 minutes, shooting 44% from the field and 41.2% from three-point range. In his last 8 games, where the Rockets are 4-4. I know as we're recording this, the Rockets are coming off a pretty deflating loss at San Antonio, a team that entered with 11 straight losses, and a lot of us like to think, with the Rockets having won 4 of 7 going in, that they were fully capable of beating and sort of building on their momentum. That did not happen. In fact, the game wasn't even competitive. They lost by 9. It easily could have been more than that. They cut it to 9 in garbage time. But really, by and large, 4-4 in your last 8, that's still progress for a young, rebuilding group like this one. And in the last 8, Jabari's averaging 15 points, nearly 7 rebounds, 49% from the field, and 49% on three-pointers. The rebounding has ticked down a touch. It's at 7.9 over the last 14 games. In the last 8, it's to 6.9. But clearly, a more engaged Jabari Smith with his length at nearly 7 feet is going to help you a lot, especially for a team that's relatively undersized, starting a 6'3" Eric Gordon at small forward. So that's sort of the silver lining to me, even though Jalen Green has struggled a lot, especially on the road, as we've discussed, and hopefully playing at home for this extended homestand is going to get him right. One reason the Rockets have still won 4 of their last 8 games is the play of Jabari Smith, and it's happened as a rebounder. Certainly, he's gotten more physical. He seems more comfortable just in terms of embracing the NBA level of physicality, throwing his body around, getting the boards. I think he's a clear factor when it comes to that front court presence, but he's also taking steps forward as a shooter and as a creator. We're seeing him get more comfortable. That throwdown dunk he attempted in San Antonio, even though he didn't finish it, I don't think he even tries that a month ago. So we are seeing him get more comfortable, not just with making shots, but trying to do more things in the half court set as well. What are you seeing from him in terms of early December 2022 Jabari Smith that you weren't seeing this time in early November?
I mean, I think he's been the silver line, not just a silver lining. He's been a really big positive so far. I mean, when the rest of the team, basically every single person, every single player that's young is underperforming, Jabari coming to his own and being the player we expected him to be is basically what's keeping a lot of Rockets fans, engaged at this point. Obviously, he looks more comfortable shooting. I think with him, it was a lot about rhythm. He is like the speed at which he was shooting would change from 3-pointer to 3-pointer like really wildly at the beginning of the season. I think that has changed. And then like we pointed it out early in the season. If Jabari's shooting well, like if you took Jabari early in the season and you made him shoot better from 3, then that's better. That's already basically the player you expected him to be coming out of the gate. I think we have seen him get involved with sets from Silas a little bit more. I think we need to see that a lot more, especially when he's clearly the hot hand on the team right now. You wanna like ride the confidence that he has right now. But besides that, I think I don't have the stats in front of me again, but his pull-up 3-point percentage has been insane. That's very much a confidence shot. And how many times have we seen him just dribble the ball up the court and go into a pull-up 3? Teams just aren't expecting a guy that size to be pulling up from 3 in transition or just bringing the ball up the floor. We need to let him do that more. We saw a couple of games ago, the first play of the game was a play for Jabari Smith where he was coming off of some screens and then they found him in the corner and he off movement got a 3-point off to just start the game. That went well. Got to keep doing that. And the other thing I was going to point out is we are starting to see him get to the free throw line a lot better. He has a 9 free throw game against Philly. At the beginning of the sample size you named, he has a 6 free throw game against Toronto. We are seeing him, as his shot starts to fall, we are seeing people respect his shot a lot more, and it's basically unblockable. So if you're trying really hard to contest it, you're going to hit him on the arm, and refs are starting to call that more. And I've been somewhat surprised with his scoring inside. It's not pretty. It's, a lot Christian Wood like, in the sense that he's kind of like an ostrich trying to gallop into the lane. But that's something that he needs to do and he needs to improve on. So let's give him reps doing so, and him being more aggressive is also getting him to the free throw line a lot more. And I'm still not too impressed with his defense because I think he needs to bulk up a little bit more. It's to me it's been worse than advertised. But I would also add as a caveat to that the fact that we're not switching him onto guards. We're running drop a lot, and so the big strength of Jabari's it came in the scouting report. He's a really good switch defender. So let's see him. You see, he's clearly, still not built enough to deal with NBA force at this moment. Let's see him, guard some. We saw a couple of possessions on Trae Young. Let's see him guard, opposing guards, because he's quick and that doesn't require a lot of strength. So I think that's another thing that we should start doing. Jabari is starting to find the zone. Let's give him more priority in the offense, and let's see him get different looks defensively, other than just how many power forwards in the league right now are offensive options. You're kind of wasting him a little bit defensively, or his potential defensively, by just sticking him into what on most teams is a 3-and-D wing.
Mm-hmm. One of the positives with Jabari, besides his own play, it's starting to look like that's a hit for Rafael Stone. And of course, when you draft number 3 overall, you need to get at least a productive player. And some of the things that were out there after the first 10 games, of course, they were crazy premature, but it's good to be able to push back against those narratives and to at least be able to say, look, we don't know long term, is this guy a star or not? Of course, that remains to be seen, but he certainly looks like a guy who's capable of being a very quality NBA player, at a bare minimum, a starter, and hopefully a lot more than that for a long time. And for a relatively unproven front office, that's a win. This is the kind of player that you need in your rebuild. And again, he's only 19 years old. He's one of the youngest guys his entire draft class. So it's crazy how much room he still has to grow. And I mention that because as the losses mount, there's, of course, a lot of criticism, not just for, Stephen Silas and the coaching staff. We've talked about that in the past, but we're seeing some things on Twitter going after Rafael Stone as well. And as these turnovers mount, of course, there's the constant debates of, is Kevin Porter Jr. a point guard? And if he's not, why don't they have an alternative? We've discussed that before. You can look in our archives. But just in general, people are getting a little bit anxious about really the entire operation. And that comes with the losing. That's why teams don't typically go the path that the Rockets have gone down the last couple of years. And it honestly took a lot of organizational commitment from the top on down, starting with Tillman Fertitta and ownership, to be willing to do this. Because, losing this amount of games consistently, this is really the third straight season, not third straight full season, but really ever since James Harden left near the start of the 2020 to 2021 season, this rebuild has been pretty clear. Everybody's known that this is the path. And, I don't want to say there's no progress. Again, they are 4-4 in their last 8. I get it. Like, there are some positive things that you can point to. But, of course, you see a game like San Antonio where you feel going in that you're the more talented team, and somehow you end up losing by, well, they only lost by 9, but they easily could have lost by 20 plus if not putting on a run in garbage time. And fans get a little bit upset. And so I understand that perspective too. And I guess my question for you, Paolo, where do you draw the line when you're evaluating this team between what are Rafael Stone issues and what are Stephen Silas issues? Because, you can certainly point to issues of roster construction. Certainly the point guard thing is real. They don't really have a true rim protector defensively. I don't think, and in fairness to Rafael Stone, I don't think he was expecting Bruno Fernando to be, but it's not like you have Alperen Şengün and then, a Nerlens Noel type that you can plug and play when there's matchups where you need more of a rim protector. And some of this is by design. Again, they're not really trying to win this year. There's potentially a perk to losing a lot. It's last year you have full control of your draft pick, maximize your lottery odds for Victor and Scoot, and so on and so forth. We've talked about this plenty of times before. But clearly, like, some of the issues on the court are just the fact that the team is not good enough. And there's also other issues in which you say, hey, this team isn't very good, but there's also ways that you could better utilize these guys. So when you look at their major issues, where do you draw the line between, this is a Rafael Stone issue, this roster, no matter who the coach is, just simply isn't capable of doing this? And then what's a Stephen Silas issue in terms of, well, even with a roster that's extremely young and not that good, they should be better than they are? Where do you draw the line in terms of assigning blame when they have a game like Thursday in San Antonio?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because we're not in the room when these decisions are being made. We don't know if Stone has a heavy hand in rotations. We don't know if that's mostly Silas. I think there's things that you can clearly pin on the head coach. Holding guys accountable is one of them. Getting guys ready to face San Antonio is another one of them. The actual play on the floor is one of them. But then again, you can't criticize a coach without criticizing the GM as well. because the GM put the coach in place, and the GM has the power to take the coach out of the team. With some exceptions, depending on how ownership feels about it and how willing they are to spend it on a new coach. But you do have to give some of the blame to Rafael Stone as well. That being said, the way I have a different way to look at GMs. A lot of people like to look at trades. A lot of people like to look at the draft. My philosophy when it comes to a GM is your job is to have a direction. That's the key. After having a direction, your job is to keep going towards that direction without making any franchise-altering mistakes. I think that's the key part, because nobody is perfect and nobody has the power of hindsight. And so when we look at Rafael Stone, we can clearly, pinpoint some decisions that didn't make much sense at the time and don't make much sense now. I have more of a problem with looking at decisions that don't make sense now but made sense at the time. And so some of the ones that didn't make sense at the time. To me, getting Victor Oladipo instead of Caris LeVert, it wasn't a smart decision. Victor Oladipo in specific because he was expiring, not because of Caris LeVert or missing out on Caris LeVert. Not that at all. I think that was a misstep. But once again, when we go back to it, it's not a franchise-altering decision. You lost out on a first-round pick probably on average there.
Yeah, and in general, I'm right there with you when we talk about the history of Rafael Stone. Again, it's just sort of prioritizing the degree of the mistakes. It's not, a lot of people just look at, well, how many wins has he had and how many losses? And it's more about the magnitude of the wins versus the magnitude of the losses. Yeah, you can fairly question, did they maximize the Jared Allen portion of the Harden trade? Even if, and I think a lot of Rockets fans would agree, I don't think Jared Allen on that contract really made sense for the Rockets at that time in their rebuild. But could they have gotten more than the late first-round pick, what they got for flipping into Cleveland? Probably, or at least they should have tried to drive a harder bargain than that.
People forget that at the time, and even though that has soured, and people forget that at the time, Christian Wood looked like a legit star in the making. He looked great next to James Harden. There were some, there was a lot more positivity when it comes to his defense. He was playing his role. He wasn't like shooting step back threes. He wasn't posting up every other possession. And so it made a lot of sense at the time to say Christian Wood's the better center out of him and Jared Allen, and they won't work well together. And so it made sense to reroute Jared Allen to a third team, especially knowing, and people forget this again, at the time when the trade was made, it was already reported that Cleveland was going to offer him $20 million in free agency a few months later when the season ended. And if Rafael Stone was not ready to offer that kind of money, that it makes sense to trade him. And if Cleveland is putting it out there around the league that they're offering this kind of money, and at the time nobody thought Jared Allen was worth that kind of money, then that's going to scare other teams off as well. And that's going to reduce the leverage you have to trade with Cleveland themselves. People also forget that we got a salary dump of Taurean Prince at the same time, which allowed for flexibility to make other trades. So I think the Jared Allen bit is not the one that bothers me the most. But sorry to interrupt you. You were making a point.
No, I was just saying that in general, the misses, regardless of how you rank those misses, again, they're relatively small in the grand scheme. Could you have done more with the LeVert and Allen part of the James Harden trade? Should you have traded Eric Gordon at the 2022 deadline, even if it was a late first round pick? You may end up getting that or less now because he certainly hasn't bolstered his value and he's only older this season, and you may need to move him. Trade season basically starts December 15th, which is this coming week, because that's when most of the players that signed this past offseason can be dealt. So there's so many more opportunities from a math perspective around the league. Again, if the Rockets do end up taking less for Eric Gordon or the same just because they have to move him, I mean, I guess it's a loss, but it's a small loss in the grand scheme. Whereas the wins that he's had, like so quickly pivoting in that 2020 to 2021 season when they began as a quasi contender with James Harden, to be able to bottom out and keep their draft pick, turning that into Jalen Green, and then seeing the positive signs we were just talking about with Jabari Smith Jr. That's so much more important than again, the Karis LeVert, Jared Allen portion of the Harden trade, the vast majority of it was about those Brooklyn first-round draft assets. The first one is already in with Tari Eason. Hopefully there's more than that down the road if the Nets have to blow things up. And again, that's just sort of what I would push back. I feel like a lot of people look at it as though it's just about he's had X amount of wins and X amount of losses. No, it's more about the magnitude of the wins and the magnitude of the losses. And to this point, it feels like within the appropriate context of the rebuild, the magnitude of the wins has been bigger.
Yeah, I think you can point out to Jason Tate was a steal. You can point out to KJ Martin was a steal. Tari Eason is looking like a steal. I think another thing that needs to be brought up is choosing the Brooklyn package over the Philly package to me is a big win. Was a big win back at the time. Looks even bigger of a win now. That was the franchise-defining decision. He nailed that. Getting Jalen Green, you can argue Evan Mobley is better. I don't believe so. But he didn't pick Jalen Suggs, for example. That would have been a franchise-changing decision. Going for someone else other than Jabari Smith, I mean, it's way too early to tell who's going to be good or not. But selecting that would have been another franchise-altering decision. I think it's unfair. Just a few that pop into my head. People criticized Stone. I think when Cam Reddish got dealt to the Knicks for a late first, people criticized Stone because everybody wanted Cam Reddish, right? And well, it turned out that Cam Reddish wasn't worth a first round pick. He's been, he's requested the trade again since. But I think we're approaching a point where he's going to have a lot more of these franchise-altering decisions in a lot closer of a time span. It's not going to be once a year in the draft. It's going to be, next offseason, free agency. A lot of people point out that he's too attached to KPJ, right? Mm-hmm. If they don't go after a point guard this next offseason, either by trade or by signing, and KPJ is not up to the task next season, well, that's going to be a franchise-altering mistake. I think how long we hold on to Stephen Silas may be another franchise-altering mistake. Although I'm not gonna put it all on Stone because I'm not sure how much of it is like if it was up to Stone, would Silas still be the coach? I can't answer that question because I think it's also important to take into consideration that there's someone above Stone. Tillman has to accept firing a coach and getting another coach. So I'm not even sure I can blame Stone completely on that. And I think that plays to his advantage from a public perception standpoint, at least for me, because we know so little that it's hard to judge because you're not in the room and you don't know what opportunities he's passed up on, for example. Yeah. And I think there's been a few moments where we've kind of looked into the right decision to some extent. For example, back then it looked like Christian Wood was a star or close to it. And if you believe that, then trading for Aaron Gordon made sense. He was the prototypical power forward you wanted next to Christian Wood, someone who can, protect the rim to some extent, can guard beefier fives, etc. Spending 2 first-round picks on Aaron Gordon back then would have been a mistake with hindsight, a massive mistake, because we're very, very far away from, and we were back then, from turning this around as quickly as it might have seemed. And so that's one they perhaps looked into because someone offered more than them, for example. I think there's been decisions that Rafael Stone perhaps could have enforced over the coaching staff. I think Daishen Nix is very puzzling. You have to wonder is it because Silas really likes Nix, or is it because the front office, who is supposed to value him as a lottery pick, really likes Nix? And something that happens with GMs sometimes is they're looking for the diamond in the rough, and sometimes it's kind of like a sunk cost fallacy without the cost thing. It's like, okay, I hit on Jason Tate, I hit on KJ Martin, here's Daishen Nix. I'm going to make him a hit, so I'm going to give him more chances than he perhaps deserves. Because if he works out, then people are going to see this as, oh, Rafael Stone got this guy as an undrafted free agent, and he turned out to be an NBA player. Perhaps KPJ might be something similar. Okay, Rafael Stone got KPJ for a second-round pick, and he turned out to be great. We are still not able to tell if this is Stone kind of pushing for guys that would make him look like a great GM, or is it Silas that doesn't have, that has guys that are already established and doesn't have the guts to bench a player that's been here since for a longer period of time? Because we've seen that plenty. KPJ is very much the senior player when it comes to point guards. We've seen him held accountable maybe twice in a game. Like so far during Salas's tenure, and one of them was this season when they sat him basically through the second and third quarters and then brought him back in the fourth, and he eventually carried the game. I think can't quite remember against which team this was, but you're getting the gist of what I'm saying. It's hard to tell what's up to Rafael. There's logic behind saying it's Rafael Stone's fault, but we also know way too little to be able to make these assumptions, and so when it comes to judging Rafael Stone, if it were up to me, I'll judge him positively or negatively. I'm not going to say he's a genius, and I'm not going to say he's incompetent until probably 2 years from now. Because then you're giving him 2 off seasons to actually try to build a good team, because anybody can strip a team down for assets and tank to different levels of effectiveness, but anybody can do that. How he uses his money, or how he uses the cap space, how he prioritizes, and how he's willing to say no to some of the players that have been here a long time, if that's the correct decision. KPJ specifically is going to be another one. There's another draft coming up, and now it's going to finally be time. Okay, let's build some winning basketball. What's your vision of winning basketball? We know what it was for Morey. Morey wanted a heliocentric player, a pick and roll partner, and a bunch of 3-and-D wings. What's the vision of a winning team for Rafael Stone?
And in fairness to Stephen, we should point out that we don't know exactly, what percentage of these decisions are his versus, the front office having a hand in it. We know there's been a few anecdotes from guys I trust, like Kelly Yuko, that, for example, at practice, Rafael Stone is a bit more actively involved than Gerald Morey was. So again, just want to, be fair to Stephen Silas. It may cut both ways, and that there's some things we assign to Stephen that are sort of above his pay grade as well. So we're just doing it from the lens of what we can see as relative outsiders. And the last question I wanted to bring up on this subject has to do with the timeline, and you already touched on it, because I think with Stephen Silas, we all understand for a lot of reasons, he's going to be judged this season and really over the next 4 months. That's why I think this homestand is a big deal. If they could somehow in these next 7 games, let's say they win the Spurs and Magic games, which is, teams they should beat on paper. Now they lost to those same Spurs a couple of days ago, but that was in San Antonio. But let's be optimistic. Let's say they beat those teams. They already did beat Orlando once. That's 2 games, and that you steal 1 or 2 more. If you do, combine that with the fact you're 4-4 in your last 8, that's, a 15-game stretch, not a tiny sample, where you're either 7-8 or 8-7. That's a stretch of competent play. And while it's not about wins and losses this season, it's not like the 7-game win streak from a year ago where it was obviously unsustainable with Garrison Matthews turning into Gary Bird. No, they're 4-4, as we talked about earlier, in large part because we're seeing growth from Jabari Smith Jr. And let's hope that Jalen Green gets back on track at home. And so if you win on the back of those guys, it is a bit different than, again, the Gary Bird streak from a year ago. It's more sustainable. And really, it was Gary Bird and Eric Gordon, 2 of your veterans, when they were on this 7-game streak barely over a year ago. So if they can show some signs, not saying you go 8-7 in 15 games, you give Stephen Silas a contract extension right then. Of course not. But at least it's something that you can say, hey, this is a feather in his cap. This is something you can sort of keep in the back of your mind and see how things progress over the rest of the year. Because for a lot of reasons, we know this is when you have to make an evaluation of Stephen Silas. This is the last fully guaranteed year of his contract. And for better or for worse, by the end of this year, you have to come to a conclusion about whether he's the guy that can make you more than simply the sum of your individual parts. Can the collective unit be better than simply the individual talent within it? That's what you want to see. We haven't really seen it yet, except for very small flashes. I hope that changes. But again, it's a big year for Stephen, and that's what these last 50 or 60 games are going to be all about. As far as Rafael, I'm right there with you. It can't be this year. But I do think, I don't want to say that 2024 is for sure the timeline for Rafael, but that's when it's going to be a lot closer. Because, of course, he's got all the cap room coming up. It's also going to be year 3 for his first big draft class. Jalen, Alperen Şengün, Usman Garuba, Josh Christopher. I don't want to say that next season is, the year for Rafael, because some of it's out of his control. Who says yes to you in free agency? You don't want to just throw money wildly. If it makes sense to sort of just roll it over for next year, maybe from a perception standpoint, it makes more sense to be aggressive in free agency when you're closer to winning, depending on how this year finishes out. There's a lot of variables at play. But I do think that ownership, it's not like they're going to give him just an unlimited leash. Clearly, he had this comment that he got ratioed for on Twitter. People were asking, how should you judge the Harden trade? And he said, basically, get back to me about 2030. And of course, what he's talking about is when all the draft picks have been made and you see how these players develop. Of course, he's not naive. That's not how it works in reality. At some point, it's about wins and losses, and ownership's going to want to see progress, and it's not going to give you just an unlimited leash. You can only give a leap of faith to a certain extent. At some point, they've got to see something to believe in, giving him. We don't know the details of his contract quite as well as we do with Stephen Silas, but again, at some point they're going to have to decide, is he worth another 4 or 5 year contract? And the criteria, while not all wins and losses, that's certainly going to be a part of it. So again, it's not going to be this year, and it may not fully be next year, but at least 2024, I guess a year and a half from now, it's going to be a lot closer. So for me, the timeline for Stephen Silas, the timeline is clearly the next 6 months. For Rafael Stone, I'm thinking next 18 to 30 months. Is that where you're at on this?
Okay, 18 to 30 months would place it at what, middle of
24 to middle of 25. Depending on what happens, the rest of this year in free agency. I think in a perfect world, you'd have an evaluation by 2024, which is 18 months. But depending on circumstances, you might have to delay it 1 more year than that, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
And then we're on the same page. I think we talked before, but Stephen is basically the next 6 months, right?
Oh, I disagree with you on that one. I'm out on him already.
Well, I know, but I meant to at least give him a chance. What I mean is play out the year.
Okay,
It doesn't, 6 months is the longest, is what I'm saying.
To give him a chance, I think it would require a lot of change, but I would give him until the All-Star break.
Okay.
Because at that point, if you're looking to bring in another coach, he can get a couple of months of a head start. And for him, and it's not hard for him to pass that test, in my opinion. There's just a few very easy decisions to make. Have you had the guts to bench Eric Gordon perhaps for KJ or TyTy Eason? Are you starting to run more offense for Jabari? Are we finally using KPJ in a role where he's getting more catch and shoot 3-pointers because that's his strength? Are we holding guys accountable? Are we when guys start pulling their shenanigans and not trying so hard? Are you benching them? That's the type of stuff I want to see.
So, yeah, I think a better way to phrase it then, because, again, it shouldn't be this granular anyway, because there's certainly going to be ebb and flow for better or for worse, given the nuances of NBA games. But basically, Steven is basically a matter of months, whereas with Rafael, we're talking, probably another year or two to give him a full shake and truly evaluate some of the decisions that he's made.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I think, usually you want to give both your head coach and your GM, you want to give them a chance to capitalize on what they've built during the rebuild and give them at least 1 year of, okay, let's see what you're made of, try to win. I think Rafael Stone has done enough to give me hope and to believe that his process is sound and to believe that, hey, this is a guy that knows what he's doing, so he should be given a chance, as opposed to, I'm not going to get into it again, but as opposed to Silas, who I think it hasn't shown enough to deserve the chance to actually go out and try and win.
Yeah, fair enough. Last point for this podcast, and this is another decision that we don't know exactly what is from Rafael Stone and what's from Stephen Silas, and the truth is that it's a little bit of both. But in the past week, they've made some interesting G League moves. They brought TyTy Washington back from the Vipers, and they sent Josh Christopher down there. It sounds like from Stephen Silas's comments at practice on Saturday that it was just for this back-to-back this weekend, and they're going to bring him back to the Rockets actually in time for Sunday's game against the Bucks, although I highly doubt he'll play. He wasn't in the rotation anyway, and that would actually be 3 straight days of games, which would be a lot to ask. But it sounds like it's not a permanent stint for Josh. It's just to get him some reps when it happened. And, of course, Daishen Nix is a guard who's not playing well. There were a lot of people who sort of recoiled in horror. I posted it as soon as PR announced it, and There were a lot of people who, again, are very frustrated by the losses and sort of lashed out. This is one that I'm sort of understanding of, at least the Josh component of it, in that, look, if he's not playing and he's in year 2, he needs to get some reps. Are there times I wish he could get some NBA minutes? Sure, but just to keep him on the bench, say he's an NBA player, does not do any good. I'm fine with him going to the G League if it's going to give him some minutes, and hopefully, Stephen Silas gives him a legitimate look at some point this season. The TyTy decision, and we'll see, maybe those are tied together. Maybe they send TyTy back down once Josh is back up, because of course, while TyTy is a point guard and Josh, it's pretty clear they view him more as a combo, but really someone that's more off the ball. They are both guards. There's only so many minutes that you can come up with. And I guess I'll say, if they haven't pulled Dacian from the rotation yet, which at least as of Saturday night when we're recording this, they have not. And, you're going to have Josh waiting in the wings if we talk about garbage minutes, or if they're open to making a mid-game switch because things are just going really poorly. I guess my thing with TyTy being a rookie, it's clearly not a status thing. Guys, if TyTy's ilk late in the first round and go to the G League all the time. I like the idea of potentially running TyTy as an alternative to Dacian Nix, but if they aren't going to do that and Josh is back up, quite frankly, I wouldn't mind TyTy going back down to the G League to get more reps and just to see more from him, and just to keep him fresh for hopefully at a bare minimum the second half of the season after the All-Star break, which is when a lot of these late first round guys that spend time in the G League end up making their way to the NBA. So I guess the way I look at it differently, I don't necessarily see it as a negative. I think a lot of people are just sort of projecting their frustrations with the rebuild and all the losing onto those things. I don't see the G League as a negative. I think if those guys are playing, I don't have a problem with it. My main thing is actually just making sure that, if they bring Josh back up, why not send TyTy back down if he's not in the rotation? Just make sure that those guys are actually getting reps. That's my biggest thing. If it's at the G League, it's better for those guys to get reps than to just sit and sort of languish on the bench at the NBA level and, just take part in a few practices here and there at two-headed sitter. To me, reps, be it NBA or the G League, is the main thing. And so I don't really have a big issue with that, at least not to this point. Where are you at on those decisions?
I'm with you. I think if they're not going to be playing with the main guys, send them back to the G League. They're just, this was a discussion last year, but I'm not with the entire players learning on the bench type thing. And I think garbage time minutes, especially for Josh, aren't worth anything. And for TyTy, for Josh, because he was here last year. He had a role last year, right? He's not gonna learn anything from playing garbage time now. But TyTy, especially because, garbage time minutes, it's 4 or 5 minutes tops, and you're playing with a bunch of random dudes. TyTy is a point guard, and he's not a primary scorer. He's a primary facilitator. So he's not going to gain a lot out of playing with a random unit that has basically no system. That is just basically whoever hasn't played enough in any given night. To me, that's worthless for him. So if you're not going to play him, send him back down. And I'm actually in the same spot with Christopher. Listen, send them both back down. If you're not going to play them, there's no use for them being here.
Yeah, I guess you would point out, or it could be pointed out, that it helps to have an extra guard at the end of your bench in case of injury or mop up. But honestly, in case of injury, worst case, you have to play out one game. You do have Garrison Matthews, and then you could call them up from the G League anyway, right?
Yeah, it's that end. We have not having a guard on the floor. It's garbage time anyways. I'm okay with using garbage time to figure out if there's some shot creating chops with Tari Eason, for example. Hey, throw Tari out there and let him the classic, let him cook. Let's see what he has. It's not we're rebuilding. It's not, you don't need to have a third option ready, because while that third option is ready, he's not developing. Right, he's not learning something out of being on the bench for the entire year. That being said, please, we've seen just my weekly announcement. Let's please cut off Dacian Nix. Please,
yeah.
Let's give either TyTy or Josh. It cannot be worse than this. He is struggling. Remember when I said that his best quality was getting out of Jalen's way? He's not even doing that properly because we're not staggering KPJ and Jalen anymore.
Yeah, Good point.
So yeah, that's mostly it when it comes to those guys. I'd like to see them play, and would like to see them play with structure, especially for TyTy, because
Yeah.
as a pass first point guard, you don't get much out of just playing random pickup ball against the other team's third stringers.
Yeah. Agree. All right. Well, this is where we will leave off for today. I'm not going to spoil it with our guests just yet, but let me tell you guys, just wait a few days. We are going to have a bigger show for you in the coming days as we gear up for that aforementioned December 15th date, the unofficial kickoff of trade season. That's something that I think we can provide some great perspective on here. So we're going to talk a bit more in depth and a more macro perspective, if you will, in that show. This one's been a bit more micro as we start getting you guys geared up for these next 7 games at home, and perhaps when the Rockets can build on this relative strength, again 4-4 in their last 8 games, entering this season-long homestand of 7 games. But again, this is where we'll break it for today. For Paolo Alves, I'm Ben Dubose. If you want to follow him on Twitter, you can do so at Paolo Alves NBA. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do so at Ben Dubose, and you can follow the show on Twitter at the Lager Line. As always, this is served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing, their beer delivered in collaboration with the Houston Rockets. If you're in the Houston area, check it out if you have not already. Believe it's available regionally as well. Just hit up your local distributor and search for Clutch City Lager, the official Carbach Brewing beer developed in collaboration with your Houston Rockets. Also, if you are not following or listening to Sports Talk 790 already, I strongly encourage you to do so. Of course, that's a flagship radio station where you can listen to the Rockets games or stream it at sports790.com. You can also follow them on Twitter at sports790 or at Sports Talk 790, excuse me. Almost shortchanged them, but yeah, Sports Talk 790 on Twitter and sports790.com is the website. With those plugs out of the way, we will break. For Paolo, I'm Ben. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Lager Line.